Friday, April 25th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Welcome to our federal election countdown show. Monday is the big Mark Your X day. That being said, an estimated record 7.3 million Canadians have already cast their ballots in early voting. Today we ask you, have candidates and parties done enough to earn your vote? Tell us about it. So that question, right? Who will be Canada's next Prime Minister? You can join CBC News Live on Monday, April 28th, for election night results from coast to coast to coast. You can watch Canada Votes 2025 with Rosemary Barton, Adrian Arsenault, and the CBC News team at 8 p.m. Island time, half an hour earlier in most of Labrador, and also everywhere you get your CBC News. There's also and because I'm so fond of radio, a CBC radio special co-hosted by Susan Bonner and Pia Chattopadhyay. That's at 8:30 Newfoundland time and half an hour earlier in most of Labrador on CBC Radio 1. A bit of a housekeeping announcement. That's for later in the show. Earlier this week, I moderated a housing and homelessness forum at Memorial University's Signal Hill campus. It was hosted by End Homelessness St. John's and Choices for Youth. The intention of this event was to hear from candidates directly on their stance on issues related to housing and homelessness, and to respond to some community questions. So you had David Brazel, Conservative candidate, St. John's East; Mary Shortall, NDP candidate, St. John's East; Joanne Thompson, Liberal candidate, also St. John's East; Otis Crandall, Green Party candidate, St. John's East, and Tom Osborne was there, Liberal candidate for Cape Spear; Corey Curtis, Conservative candidate, Cape Spear; Brenda Walsh, NDP candidate, Cape Spear, had to send their regrets. The full thing, if you're sitting down thinking, I'd like to hear from these candidates on housing, you can listen to the full thing on the CBC Listen app. It's there. The headline for it, the slug, as we say in the biz, The Signal presents Housing and Homelessness Forum. So go to the CBC Listen app. It is there. At the end of today's show, we will play a section of it. We've got a 6-minute chunk that we will play. So that's coming. And it's also there for you. I mean, don't listen to it now. Listen to this show now. And if you want to go listen to the Housing Forum thing, you can do it whenever you want, like doing the dishes tonight or going for a run. But for today's show, we're asking, have candidates and parties done enough to earn your vote? That could be a housing thing. That could be a cost of living thing, dealing with the U.S. president sort of thing. You name it. The lines are open through this show. I've got folks here in studio I will introduce shortly. The numbers to call if you want to join us, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255, The Signal at cbc.ca. Text us, 709-327-8206. Joining me now for the conversation for most of the hour. We've got three folks who have been working with candidates, right? Door knocking, talking to folks about the issues, trying to figure out what people want for voting. We also have someone who's been helping the urban Indigenous communities get answers they need for vote casting. So here with me in studio, we've got Chad Bedard, manager of Knowledge Mobilization with First Light. We've got Ben Wheaton, who's been campaigning with the Liberal Party. We've got Yvonne Earle, campaigning with the New Democratic Party, and Kristina Ennis, campaigning with the Conservative Party of Canada. Hi, folks. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
All right. Big surprise first question for you all. What is it? What is this election? Chad, we'll start with you. What does this election mean to you?
I think it means a lot to every Canadian, as we just watched the U.S. presidency election. So
yeah.
I think that's got everybody a little bit on pins and needles across Canada. For the urban Indigenous population, it means that we're looking for a candidate to advance truth and reconciliation, as it's been somewhat stalled. And we know that across the board since early 2025, there's only been about 20 that have been active. So we're definitely looking for a candidate that can advance truth and reconciliation. But for me, more personally, I have 3 kids under 3. So also,
Wait, 3 under 3?
Yes, 3 under 3. Yeah.
Did they give you one of the King Charles medals? Because you deserve one for that.
Yeah. So if I seem a little tired, that's why. No, but on a more personal level, it's just looking for a candidate to have my future in mind and my kids' future in mind. So
yeah, massive thing to think about, right? And 3 kids under 3. So
yeah, thank you.
All that to think about. Ben Wheaton, what about yourself? What does this election mean to you?
The election means a lot.
I think for us younger folk coming up through, the cost of living is a big thing I'm hearing and worrying about myself. First-time home buyer, obviously, it's something that weighs on my mind a lot, and university is not getting cheaper. So it's just a lot of things of when I do my part to get out and get into the world, I just want a candidate in the government that's going to represent those values, everybody's values, to have a fair shot and get the ball rolling.
All right. Yvonne Earle, what about yourself?
Well, I'm kind of the other end of the spectrum from Ben, and I'm interested in some of the issues, of course, around for seniors. But for me, this election was a coming together of several things. First of all, I've been an NDP supporter since I started voting. But this time in my riding, we had a really strong candidate, somebody whom I thought very highly of from seeing her work and other things. And so I put my energy behind Mary. And I think she'd be a wonderful constituency person for St. John's East, and that's what I'm working towards.
All right. Kristina Ennis.
I echo everything that you three have just said, but I'm going to add a little bit of a different spin. So I do business development and HR consulting, and I enjoy doing organizational reviews. And this election kind of feels to me like a little bit of a large organizational review. We had boundary changes all over the country that a lot of people aren't familiar with or aware of. Even now, I won't be surprised if a lot of people show up at the wrong polls on Monday. We also have a lot less incumbents around, so the combination of those two things, my boundaries changed, and I don't have an incumbent to vote for where I live. So even just becoming an informed voter, it's not like, oh, I'll vote for the person who was there before. So there's more work for us to do as voters this time around, and we must do our due diligence to make sure we know who we're voting for.
And not to read too many numbers on the radio every once in a while, but I'm going to read a couple of numbers. We've got some data on advance polls, and I just find this interesting, okay? Because I started the show by talking about the fact that an estimated 7.3 million Canadians have already cast their votes, right? All right, so what does that mean for this place, Newfoundland and Labrador? Well, we've got it in from Elections Canada. Preliminary count of electors who voted at advance polls by riding. So far, here's what we have. Avalon, 13,400 and change. Cape Spear, 15,660 something. Central Newfoundland, 9,200 and change. Labrador, 2,500 and change. Long Range Mountains, 9,300 and change. St. John's East, 14,000, almost 700. Terra Nova and the Peninsula's 8,000. It's a lot of thousands of people, right? Mm-hmm. So I can't say because I don't know, and I'm like, what does it mean later for when we look at this election of who shows up now on Monday to vote compared to early voting? But what we do know is that thousands of people have already cast their ballot. So for those of you, which is the four of you here, who are speaking to people who have either voted or will be voting, what are you hearing from folks about the whether it's the election or this time that we're in when we're also engaged in the act of voting for the next government?
Well, similar to you, Anna, we actually held an all-candidates forum on Indigenous rights for the St. John's East riding. We did have one planned for the Cape Spear riding, but unfortunately the plan fell through. So we put that together so that we could provide as much education on the platforms of all the candidates in the riding for the urban Indigenous people, asking questions around UNDRIP and the TRC.
UN Declaration
on rights of Indigenous people.
Indigenous folks.
Yes, and the full implementation of UNDRIP, which was adopted in 2021, I believe, by the Liberal government. And we did ask the candidates on where they stood on that. Yeah. But we were really trying to provide as much education as we possibly could to the population around the candidates' platform on Indigenous rights before the early voting started, to try and drive the votes as much as we could to try and get people out. Yeah. And we did hold also a community voting day at First Light, where we provided transportation to urban Indigenous individuals, to the polling stations so that they could go to the Elections Canada polling stations as well.
So what's the range for some of for what some of the folks are saying to you, right? So the urban Indigenous community, folks within it, around what, like, their thoughts?
You hear
It
the
must
same,
be huge.
Yes, you hear a lot of the same things. Though there's a lot of barriers that still
Yeah.
urban Indigenous people face, and a lot of the reasons that they don't vote. They don't see themselves in some of the candidates and
Yeah.
things like that. So you do still hear that, but we're really trying to drive and push for all urban Indigenous individuals or Indigenous individuals across Canada to get out, because we are such a large part of the population, and we're so underrepresented when it comes to voting. And we think that this election is holding a lot of power, more so than others have. Again, seeing what has happened in the South, causes a little bit of worry for everybody else. So we really, really want Indigenous individuals to get out and vote as much as possible. So we've been trying to get that up.
How are the candidates doing when, like, you said St. John's East, right? How are the candidates doing with talking about and understanding issues that folks in the urban Indigenous community find important, whether it's truth and reconciliation, the UN Declaration, that kind of a thing?
They did a very good job, I would say, at the All Parties Forum.
Yeah.
They did a great job answering the questions. They seemed, knowledgeable about UNDRIP and TRC, which is a great first start. But we did also send out a follow-up to the Cape Spear and Mount Pearl individuals to allow them to respond in written form. And we have not received any back.
Any?
No,
Okay.
not one back
All right.
yet. So.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a difference.
Yes, a little bit of a difference, yeah.
Well, all right, folks. So same that question for you three, right?
Can you read the question?
Can I repeat the question? So in this time, what you're out
Oh,
talking to folks. What are you hearing? What are folks telling you right now about this time and place and election that we're in?
I think the things I've been hearing since I'm door knocking, it's I think to branch off from that, it's what we saw south of the border.
Yeah.
It I think put a worry and a little bit of a shock into folks. Democracy is fragile, and I think we're really seeing that. And folks they're worried about what's going to happen. In 4 years' time down there, how we're going to deal with what I guess used to be our best friends, our closest ally. There seems to be a new world order starting of trade, how we negotiate, where we go, who we can call our friends now. Defense is taking a big jump in investing and getting and really investing into our national defense. But I was out door knocking. I had an elderly woman, roughly in her 80s, and we're talking, and she invites me inside, and she has my hand held, and she is just shaking her head and saying, "I just don't know how I'm 80 years old, and I'm worried that our country is, something's going to happen to Canada." And she said, "I just can't believe that's what I'm worrying about right now." She was like, I should be enjoying my retirement and not sweating too much," she said. But it's a real fear of what we're seeing on the doors, and just the worry of what's coming next. Because every day you wake up, I'm trying to understand what's going on in the news or stay up on it, but it's changing by the second. And I think it's really weighing on folks of what the next couple of years entail for us here.
And when you're talking to someone who's 80 or in their 80s, this is someone who's born either in the just as World War II ends, or in the final years, or just after. Right? So this is the time frame we're talking about here. So they grow up with the parents imprinting on them what everyone went through. And now to reach that age and to start feeling massive amounts of I'll just say fear, and because of the stability, quite the thing, right? To think about.
Yeah, and it's mind-boggling, even for myself, to sit here and have this conversation, and there's nothing really I can say in the situation to give reassurance in the sense of, because I don't think anyone can predict what the president's going to do next, or what he's going to say, or what his actions are going to be.
Yeah.
But it's really taken a shift into Canadian politics. We're seeing the conversation shift. You know, there's always going to be conversations with the economy, health, infrastructure. That'll always be there, but the tone has certainly changed from what I'm seeing.
Yvonne?
Yeah, I would say in the early days of the campaign, definitely that was when Trump was very much in the news about his approach to Canada. What we were hearing from people was, well, you know, I've voted NDP for most of my life, but this time I have to be strategic. And people are thinking in terms of not supporting the NDP because they don't see them as being the party that will win the election. And they very definitely do not want another party to get in. And so they're doing a strategic vote. That, when Mr. Trump became more quiet in the last few weeks, there seemed to be less of that at the door. You still heard it, but people were back to focusing on the issues that were really critical to them, which was housing, cost of living, disability benefits, the fact that they're not increasing with the cost of living. And then most recently, I was in an apartment complex that wasn't for seniors, but had mostly senior residents, and hearing the concerns of people who are, one couple just got a notice of a rent increase of $175 a month and are wondering how much longer they're going to be able to keep that up and pay the rest of their costs, and you know, sort of where they would go if they were forced out. And so, you know, sort of, so you're hearing those things. Now, I have not been going door to door or on the phones since Mr. Trump's announcement a day or so ago. So I don't know if there's been a bit of a shift back on that or not. But of course, one of the things that I have been emphasizing is you will make your decision. But remember, we're all running mini elections here in each riding, and you do have to look at who will be bringing your issues and strongly advocating for you in Parliament. And the other thing that I have said to people, we don't all elect Mr. Carney. Only the people in his riding elect Mr. Carney. And if something incredible should happen and we woke up after the election and he didn't get his seat, you know, sort of where would we be?
Yeah,
we might have a party in power, but not the person that everybody was putting their I say many people are putting their confidence in. So,
and these are great points. And that is the story of seniors in a rent increase and then wondering where do we go next, right?
Yeah.
Like that is it's such a hard thing.
So rent controls are a big issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean rent controls. Hey, that's across the spectrum for age too, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at the resident young person in the room too.
Yeah.
He's got tuition to pay, so he understands.
Kristina, what are you hearing at the door? What are folks telling you?
So, along with all of the things we've all been talking about, cost of living, things like that, I have learned that we as a population of Canadians do not understand how our government works.
Yeah.
What jurisdiction means, what the different levels of government are responsible for, how they work together or ought to work together. And the issues that I hear of at the door are very much provincial portfolio matters. However, everything's interconnected.
Yeah. Money.
And there's more young people who are facing these challenges. If I need to fight with someone about avocados, eating too many avocados and not having enough money, or like going to Starbucks so much, like that is not the problem.
No.
For young people, we are not eating too many avocados. We are not going to Starbucks too much. It's not $15 a week that's making or breaking young people's livelihoods right now. but I've loved seeing more young people actually interact at the door, even if they're voting for another party. I've had excellent discussions with people about what they care about, which honestly isn't, for the most part, isn't taxation or things like that, or retirement. It is tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, where we are right now, and yes, it's about like the act of trying to prop up and keep democracy healthy, and community building, and folks who care about community. And these are people right now. Like the thing I moderated the other day, all the different parties there. These we know these people in community, and for different political views. But everyone is there because I feel that there's care for the community.
And I'm going to do something probably unexpected. Shout out Otis from the Housing Forum the other day. Otis is a candidate in St. John's. He's with the Green Party. At the very end, in his concluding remarks, he said, we're all up here from different organizations, but we're all here for the exact same reason, because we want Canada to succeed and do better. And we can do better, and that is only going to happen together. Folks,
you're listening to The Signal. Our question for you today, have candidates and parties done enough to get your vote? Is there anything you want to talk about for the federal election as in this countdown to election day? If you want to join the discussion, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us 709-327-8206. Email us thesignal@cbc.ca. Any stories? And so we heard one story already, right, about from talking to folks at doors. Anything else stand out from who you've been involved with talking to around the election? Any other stories kind of come to mind about issues or individuals, without giving away like too much on personal stuff?
I can share one from the campaign side.
Sure.
If that's helpful. I'm seeing more people come out to help campaigns who've never been involved in campaigns, and I personally haven't been involved for that long either, but a lot of people are really nervous to go help out. They are nervous they're not going to know anybody, or they're not going to know what to do. But every single campaign and every single party, I can guarantee you, has the support and the resources to onboard people super fast and super effectively. And there's so many people helping. Cape Spear alone has 89,000 residents. That's crazy.
That's a lot of people.
And you might meet someone that you've never seen before and assume that they're maybe friends with the candidate, and turns out they don't know anybody else. I met someone last week who I thought was a friend of someone else, and he actually knew nobody at all, and was just so frustrated that he showed up, and he's been working his butt off, and nobody knew that he had just like kind of showed up on his own.
So what does that say to you?
The change, I don't even know what it looks like. In my adult life, it's always been a Liberal government, except for the tail end of the Harper government. And so I don't know what that change should necessarily look like, but I know it's not this. And there's more younger candidates. There needs to be more diverse candidates coming forward, but there's a lot of barriers to that actually happening. So I think it's really positive. We have lots of candidates right now in the province who are parents of children who are school age, which is all growing up. I thought that to be elected meant you had your career and then you retired and then you did something else. Because I grew up with, Dennis O'Keefe, who was a retired teacher. A lot of our other elected representatives had previous careers. So that is a big change that I'm seeing as well.
Okay. Right. Anyone else?
I guess out on the doors, like it's, I guess on the point, Cape Spear is, it's a big cookie to try and tackle. But, it's, we got out from Petty Harbour to Waterford Valley, Mount Pearl, Paradise. Like, it's very different communities, and all of them have very unique and different needs. From Petty Harbour, which all the conversations were around, for the most part, when we were out there, it was infrastructure on the roads and the fishery. I mean, every door, it was the fishery, and it was a big thing. I mean, here in Newfoundland, it's it's our backbone here. And you've shifted to Mount Pearl, the conversation changes. You go to Paradise, conversation changes. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people, like you said, are getting out who never couldn't care less about politics to talk about it, get involved with it. We have welcomed so many folks from all different age groups on our campaign. Many have, for the first time voting, and they're now first time campaigning. And again, this like new momentum to get out and get involved now, because again, I'm seeing that a lot of people are seeing what's happening south of the border, and it just goes to show how quick things can change when you are putting the wrong people in such powerful positions. And it's good to see just first time voters, people from all different political stripes, change and say, what, we're coming out and we're helping, and we want to. Everyone's fighting the good fight. We're all here at the table, regardless of the colors, and we're wanting to do what's best for Canada. And it's just, regardless, in my opinion, it's just good to see. It's good to see people active, involved, learning, wanting to learn, and getting educated. And that's a big part of it, is just getting informed.
Yeah. For us, we got started with Elections Canada about a year ago.
A year out, right?
Yeah, in the hopes of hosting a special ballot location, so that because we have a lot of Indigenous people from out of town, whether it be Labrador or Western Newfoundland or other provinces that are visiting our Friendship Centre and utilizing our services. So we really hoped to have a special ballot day where we could have any individual from any riding come to our location at 70 Brookfield and vote. But unfortunately, it fell out right at the very last minute. No, so which is why we held the community voting day, where we offered transportation. But even just the amount of education we've been able to provide just through First Light to the Indigenous population has been, the Elections Canada has been over the moon about our involvement, just to try and spread the word ever so slightly to the Indigenous population. So
yeah, for helping folks understand, because I think widespread, it doesn't matter what the community is. There's a lot of folks who don't always have the understanding around our government and systems and all that 100%. Stuff, right? Unless you're really I was lucky enough to fluke into studying poli-sci, so I know 1% of something, maybe not, and most days I don't, right? But for everyone else, you're trying to just get through your day to day. Having something to go to learn a bit more, to be oh, okay, 100%. Right on.
And for a lot of our community to go out to other events, that's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
They're doing, they have other things to do, and sometimes that's way more important than going to an all candidates forum. But it is, when we set up a desk at our location where they're already coming to access our programs and access our services, they get the opportunity to learn there on the spot. And that was our big hope, and we're hopeful for 4 years down the road, maybe we'll be able to do it again. But
does Elections Canada, do they see this as reconciliation work? Because that's what it sounds like to me, right? If you're helping folks understand about democracy to get the vote out, that's a big part of that in that section.
I haven't asked them, but I know that they're very happy with what's happening and what they're doing. So.
How do you see it?
I think it's amazing. Like you said, I don't have a political background whatsoever. Exactly. So even for me, I've learned more in the last 5 weeks. Even for me, in the last 5 weeks, I've learned more about politics than I had cared to know. But no, it's been really eye opening, and it's been a great experience for our population and for our people.
Good.
I have had a couple of people, both of them older gentlemen, and the conversation has been along the line, my dear, I never voted. And I said, and actually, for me, that was such a surprise to meet somebody older who never voted. And that the surprise probably showed on my face, and I sort of went, you really? Anyway, both of them said they were so concerned about the issues around what's happening south of the border, and Canada is the 51st state, that they were going to get out and vote this time. So we had a chat then about who they were thinking about
Yeah.
and some of the issues. But I was kind of pleased. But they were also delighted that somebody had showed up on their door to talk to them about the election, because another thing we've heard in different pockets of St. John's East is that the NDP is the only ones that they've seen. I don't know if that's because our campaigners, we've had more campaigners, or they've just been more active, but there's definitely certain areas of St. John's East that haven't either received brochures or had people knock on the door. I did have somebody talk to me about the fact that she didn't like receiving these phone calls that said, if you're going to vote, press 1, and if you're going to vote, press something else. And so she was very pleased to have a person talking to her. That was a phone conversation, but it was person to person. But I think one of the things that this has raised for me is we talk about the fact that we don't want to be a two-party system like the United States, but when you're in a situation like you are this election, we're kind of turning it into a two-party system.
Yeah, it's an election. According to the polls right now, it's an election that we've not seen in decades, right? Decades and decades ago.
And I think it's a wake-up call for some people who are thinking about these issues, that maybe we need to be looking at something that's not fair at first past the post. You know, something that's more like the European type of so that you can vote your values. And that may not be the lead party, but but your values and what you stand for are going to be coming forward.
You've got my brain in a 2015 headspace and a promise from a now previous prime minister
Yes.
about changes. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's a big regret. Yeah.
What are we not hearing in regardless of so I mean the door to door, I mean who you're campaigning with or working the populations, the folks you're working with, but for you, right? What are we not hearing on this campaign for issues that you think, you know what, I'd like to hear some more about this?
The thing that I'm not hearing that concerns me is much to do about climate. Yes, there's discussion about just transition and jobs for some people, because they're either in the oil and gas industry or they've got family and they're concerned about the fact that the NDP is not supporting expansion of oil and gas. But you talk to them about the fact that you have to be looking at that might be old technology now. We have to be starting to gear up for moving the workforce somewhere else and training them to be ready for the new technologies, et cetera. But I'm not hearing people really express climate and climate change and the impact on the economy. Yeah. You know, you have a big fire like Jasper, that's going to trickle down to taxpayers because of government help and all of that kind of thing. So I'm really concerned that that's not been an issue. I've heard it. I haven't heard it at the door at all personally. I have had a couple of phone canvas conversations which have asked me about climate and the party platform.
Yeah, because they talk in transition, but when you mentioned wildfires, right, which is now a yearly thing. Also, if we're thinking hurricane season and everything else and damage around all of that, there's an insurance conversation to be had. There's a how do we fix things after conversation. Like there's a lot there, and you're right. I mean, that's not been front and center. And granted, because of south of the border, what's been said, and threats to sovereignty and everything else, that's drowning everything else out. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's the whole reason we held the All Candidates Forum is because we weren't hearing anything about truth and reconciliation or Indigenous rights at all. Yeah. And even when you listen to the debate, the only time that UNDRIP was brought up or that Indigenous rights were brought up when it was about extraction of natural resources. Yeah. When it comes to money. Yeah. So because of what is happening south of the border, like you said, everything else has been overshadowed. And the only time Indigenous rights were brought up was to do with, how do we get them on board so that we can extract resources to make more money so that our economy grows. So I think that because we are so worried about tariffs and so worried about, our economy crumbling because of Trump, that everything else seems to be somewhat overshadowed.
So often I hear on the resource extraction side of things, right? We'll hear, and I'm just going to say a general example, right? Not mentioning anything specific here, but you'll hear folks talk about, well, our partners in our Indigenous communities that who we're working with and this type of a thing. But then, to your point there, if you've got for this campaign, if folks are just talking about resource extraction and the communities around where these resources are haven't really been having this conversation yet, that's not partnership, right?
No,
There's gaps there.
Yeah, it's looking at what's called free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC. And
Thank you.
Yes, it's a very it's embedded in what UNDRIP means, and it's Indigenous rights to their land. And when you talk about extraction of natural resources, FPIC, or free, prior, and informed consent, has to come into play. And some candidates seem to kind of dance around that question and say, well, yes, but is it, they dance around as best they can as politicians. But to me, it's a bit saddening because that's not all there is. That's not the only right that we have.
Yeah.
It's not just our land that you should be taking. We should be talking about the other issues and the other rights that Indigenous people have across Canada.
Yeah, looking at all the calls to action.
Exactly.
So you see how that path for truth and reconciliation is going.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So then when folks don't hear it, I mean, I guess this goes back to the beginning of our conversation when it's like, well, sometimes it's hard to get folks to vote because they're not feeling included because in this case, only resource extraction is what's coming up.
Exactly. So
Right.
why would I vote for somebody if they're just trying to take our land? And that's what we hear sometimes. And it's like, I don't hear anything about my issues.
Yeah.
And, that's not to say that Indigenous people don't have issues with housing and things like that. They definitely do. But we also have, that added layer of rights that are being trampled. So it's, like you said, the truth part of truth and reconciliation isn't being held up, I'd say.
And briefly, before we go back to the rest of the crowd here, how does it work for funding for friendship centers across the country? Like, is there core funding typically, or how does that work?
That was one of our questions as well, was around core funding, and all candidates answered it very accurately, saying that was not something that they would ever take away, but we're, that's always on our mind, for sure, right? Like, we do receive core funding from the federal government, so it's something that we keep an eye on, and we're hopeful that whoever lands in power will maintain the understanding of how important friendship centers are.
Well, and briefly, the importance of friendship centers. Like, tell folks, like, who's coming through, right? I've got my own, because we've done stuff on the show with First Light for the last number of years. Well, since I've been here, that was before me. Ramona was there's always been I feel I've got a certain understanding. I don't know if everyone does, because if you're not involved, why would you know, right? So give us a quick explanation.
Yeah, so First Light offers service and programs to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people that assist those individuals like myself. For example, I'm from northern BC. I'm from Haida Gwaii. So for me to have connection to my culture is very, obviously, it's quite a ways away, so it's hard to do. But at a friendship center, I can have connection to at least some sort of Indigenous culture and to people that are thinking the same way that I am. And the reason I was a teacher before I started there, and when I started there, it feels like home, right? So I'm with like-minded people that are doing the same things, and we offer support to community members, Indigenous community members most often, but not always. We do offer support to non-Indigenous community members as well, with things like housing and services and things like that.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else on what we're not hearing? Kristina?
I'm not hearing the same thing as Yvonne is at the doors in terms of the communication methods. And it was people don't like the phone calls with the press one or what have you, right? So I'm going to kind of, I'll be devil's advocate here. As a young person who's had her own campaign, it is really expensive to do, and these ones are even bigger. There are limits of how much you can spend federally on your campaign. However, volunteerism overall, in society with any group is down. And there's not that you need to be incentivized to come out as a candidate early, but some people have the privilege of being able to sustain their life through work or whatever they do to earn an income, and also campaign. Most people that I know who've run who are not business owners or in senior leadership do not have the ability to do that. So in order to engage with organizations like First Light, or even do things with the news or do these forums, they can't do that until writ drop.
Yeah.
So I think these different ways of communicating actually makes it more accessible. So if those people don't like it, that's totally fine. But there's a large population of people who are rarely at their house. Chad has 3 children. You're probably not home very often either. So the chances of being home at the exact time when the one candidate knocks on one of the 50,000 doors in the area, I would.
So that's why you need layers of an approach to get to everyone, right?
I don't know what the answer is, but just being able to be informed and having enough time, because 37 days isn't enough time to talk to all of these really important issues.
Turnaround. Yep. Right. Any thoughts on what you're not hearing, or just what you're not seeing, or what you would like to see for issues to be talked about?
Yeah, for sure, climate is a big thing. I think as a young person coming up, it is. It's a big talking point. It is something that we can't treat like an elephant in a room either. Definitely for me, I know the parties have their platforms out and they do touch up on it, but it's the cost of living. Yes, there is a conversation, but I mean, I don't see myself owning a home anytime soon. It's the tuition continually going up. It's just everything is obviously getting more expensive, and yes, we are having those conversations, but we need stuff to happen and faster.
Talking's one thing, but I'm still Sisyphus here. Come on.
Slowly going more in debt.
Yeah, it's fine to see it on a bullet point on Facebook or Instagram or their websites, but it's getting it done. And I know it doesn't happen overnight and snap of the fingers. I'm aware of that, but we're playing catch up 24/7, and I feel like we're slowly really falling behind the ball here, and it's just a worry for me of just, am I doing the right things? Am I picking the correct career choice? It's not just me, but us younger folk. It's just I look at a little bit of the older generation, and it's they earn their living, they bought their homes for close to nothing back then, which back then it was probably a lot for them. But a house now up in Kenmount Terrace is $300 plus a bidding war on top of that. It's, you got single income folks. It's it just feels like an ever evading paradise of making it.
Oh yeah,
and
I just 400,000, 500,000, 600,000,
yeah,
right?
It's like I can't get ahead, and I'd like to see a little bit more action and due diligence towards that than just saying we're going to address it.
As we wind down here, because I've got some tape to play too, to build on briefly, we'll go back to each person, about 30 seconds, but build on that future of Canada that you want, or the future of this land that we're living on and in with folks. Yeah,
it's, I would like to see a little bit of stepping stones for younger folks coming up, whether that's, I think first-time home buyer really need to knock down the barriers there. It's quite daunting to be a home buyer and have that overhead over you.
Yeah. I think that that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. That's a massively important thing.
And my perfect Canada, everything, we can just have a house and nothing costs us anything.
Sounds good. Sign me up.
What do I know?
So, Chad, what do you think?
I think it's important to think about what kind of Canada we want to live in. Do we want to be the Canada that I think we're seen as right now, as the nice Canada that advances human rights, or do we want to be more aligned with our southern neighbors and somebody who is ignoring more human rights issues? So it all comes down to how do we want to look? What do we want to look like? And what kind of Canada do we want to be?
You said that in such a nice, upbeat way, but that's so heavy and serious.
It is, yeah. And it's very front line and center.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I appreciate all your comments today. Kristina, 30 seconds, future for this country.
So, brief story is that I my mom made me start saving for my RSP when I was 18, $15 every 2 weeks. I was
good.
mad at her at the time. I was away at university. By the time I was 27, I paid for my university with student loans. I didn't have money from my family. I grew up with a single mother. By 27, I was able to have a down payment saved for my house. I just did business. I didn't do anything crazy nuts to obtain my down payment for my house. Ben said older generations. It's not older generations. It's literally one generation ahead of Ben who was able to do that. And just a couple of years younger are not going to have that opportunity. So I would like to see a Canada where young people are being fought for. And to revise my last answer, what I'm not hearing at the doors is people fighting for, fighting for Ben and people of that demographic who are coming up behind, who don't understand.
Set up for success.
Yvonne, 30 seconds.
Well, I'm going to challenge Chad a little bit because I don't want Canada to look like the nice country to the north of the United States. I want Canada to be the good country. And I think that comes with building in strong, resilient social programs, revising where we put our money. Do we subsidize industries to an extent and then not invest in university education? I keep telling people, Joey Smallwood had free university education in Newfoundland for 4 years. I was lucky. I went my first year with free education. So, we need to be building those. If we build those programs in, those solid social programs, then, we revise our tax system, I know that's a big one, to support those, we will make ourselves more different. We will have more to lose, and we will be a stronger, better society for everybody.
Yvonne Earle, thank you so much. Kristina Ennis, thank you. Ben Wheaton, thank you. Chad Bedard, thank you, folks, for this discussion. Earlier on the show, I started it saying I had some tape to play, Housing and Homelessness Forum, Signal Hill Campus on Tuesday. I was there moderating it, hosted by End Homelessness St. John's and Choices for Youth. On this tape, you will hear David Brazel, Conservative candidate St. John's East, Mary Shortall, NDP candidate St. John's East, Joanne Thompson, Liberal candidate St. John's East, Otis Crandall, Green Party candidate, you guessed it, St. John's East, and Tom Osborne, Liberal candidate Cape Spear, Corey Curtis with the Conservatives, and Brenda Walsh with the NDP sent their regrets. It's 6 minutes. I'll come back after to promo Monday's show. But folks, thank you so much for listening this week. And, we'll see what happens on Monday now, won't we? Cheers. Will your party develop an end homelessness strategic plan? If so, please share specific details. Mary Shortall, how about you kick it off?
Yes, our party will absolutely do that. In fact, it's part of what the party's been talking about for a long time. It takes collaboration with levels of government. We've already talked about that, but also of the organizations that do this work. And oftentimes the organizations that do this work have either core funding or limited funding. So I think it's really important that there's a continuum of funding to the organizations that do that work. And I understand in this community, the organizations work together very effectively. And I think that's the best way to address how we develop a strategy, and that we include the organizations besides the financial support, but also the voices of people with lived experience, because that's really important, that we look towards that system of care. I know that Doug talks about what it means to address homelessness and what that actually means, so that we're not only talking about a homeless and housing and affordable housing strategy, but all the supports around that, including income supports that help build thriving communities. And I think that's a really important discussion that we need to have, because we're still in a crisis and we haven't resolved this crisis. And so we really need to not just put our money where our mouths are, but also our passion and our commitment to make that happen.
Thank you, Mary. Otis Crandall.
Well, a couple of things that I've already mentioned, and the party itself has also mentioned. The number one thing is that the housing crisis has to be declared a national emergency. Beyond that, we need to change legislation so that having a home or having accommodation, having a place to live, having housing is a fundamental human right. Those are two things that need to be done, and they need to be done immediately. Beyond this, it is a very complex question to answer in 90 seconds. But some of the things that I've already mentioned them here today, but I'll reiterate: we do need rent cap. We do need to develop social programs throughout the country so that we have social services, because these eat into people's money. Cost of medical stuff, dentistry, mental health, these cut into their spending. They shouldn't. They should be fundamental services. The universal programs we have. Education should be universal. These are all things which are costing people a lot of money, and this affects housing. So I'd say we need better universal services. We need rent control, and we need national emergency of housing crisis and fundamental rights.
Thank you, Otis. Tom Osborne.
I guess the short answer is yes. The longer answer is based on what is in the Liberal Party platform. Looking at the other platforms, I think it is a comprehensive platform that will work towards reducing and eventually, hopefully, ending homelessness for our vulnerable populations and providing deeply affordable and supportive housing.
Thank you, Tom. David Brazel.
Yeah, again, 100% supportive of putting together a strategy that addresses homelessness here. And that comes with working with the key stakeholders here, developing policies and strategies that benefit everything and everybody. What we have to do here, too, again, is drive our economy so people have good paying jobs, because they've been trained and given the supports to do that. They've been given the social supports, if it's interventions or if it's mental health issues, if it's supportive services to do that, so that people can make a good, powerful paycheck. They can keep more of that money for themselves to decide what has to happen. That the economy is booming, so that developers don't have to make a lot of money on one development. They can spread it out so it becomes more affordable. Working with our institutions here to make things affordable across the board. Having policies around rent control and around interventions so that there's safety for everybody. Everybody has an entitlement and a necessity to have a safe, affordable housing unit that they feel is comfortable for them. Best way we can do that is drive our economy by supporting the agencies that are going to provide services that with the ability to do that financially, and then let them deal with some of the services that are necessary as support mechanisms while we drive the economy through investments in education, investments in industry, and investments, more importantly, in people. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Joanne Thompson.
Thank you, and I am proud that Tom and I are both part of a government that has invested in ending homelessness, and we see that through the Reaching Home program and what it's meant to this province. We need to continue with this work. We need to expand it, and we're seeing that in the additional supports on housing. We also see it through the extended supports in healthcare. You can't separate access to healthcare from supports for housing. We need to see it in the renewed support for transit, and we need to make sure we get our share in this province. And we see it in supports to the justice system and how we need to look at how we support people who are in addictions, who are suffering with mental illness, their supports while they're part of a justice system. We need to see this in every aspect of government supports that touch people's lives. That work needs to continue, and I'm proud to be part of a government that sees this as part of ongoing work, not something that we suddenly need to begin in 2025.
All right. So if you were just listening to that thinking, I would like to hear more about housing and homelessness from this forum that I moderated earlier this week, a housing and homelessness forum at Memorial University's Signal Hill campus, hosted by End Homelessness St. John's and Choices for Youth. And I mentioned earlier in the show, the intention of this event was to hear from candidates directly on their stance on issues related to housing and homelessness issues and to respond to community questions. So that full thing is up on the CBC Listen app under the Signal. So you can find it there and listen to I think, an hour and a half to 2 hours, however long it was. It is there for all of you today. Thanks so much for listening. The Signal at cbc.ca if you want to send us a note, thoughts about stuff. Coming up on Monday, the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Atlantic is on May 8th. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous naval campaign of World War II, lasted from 39 to May 8th of 1945. We're going to talk history on Monday, and I'm asking you if you've got a family connection to the Battle of the Atlantic or thoughts on it. Get in touch with us. We've got a historian in, we've got a couple divers in who dive wrecks. It's going to be a great conversation. Cheers.